Hello, this is Mike Swanson. You're listening to the Wall Street Window podcast. A few moments, I'm going to be speaking with Carmine Savastano. Carmine is the author of the book, Human Time Bomb, The Violence Within Our Nature, available now at Amazon.com. We're going to talk about the coronavirus and what is going on. But before I talk to him, I want to tell you about a story I'm linking to with the show notes here. The title is Fed is Seizing Control of the Entire U.S. Bond Market. The story was published on Yahoo Finance this weekend. The Fed has lowered rates to zero in March. They announced unlimited bond buying, quantitative easing, but those operations are aimed at the Treasury bond market and high-grade bonds. This additional step the Fed is now taking enables it to also buy pure junk bond, something that no central bank has ever done anywhere at any moment. Now the Fed is getting ready to do it. The Fed is now the U.S. bond market. Implications are clear, and one of them is gold is going up. Gold made a new high on Monday. Many gold stocks are now surging and soaring as a result of these policies that are only just starting. Something for you to keep in mind if you are interested in investing in the financial markets or have investments. I expect this outperformance of gold relative to the U.S. stock market to simply continue now for the next couple years. So all that said, let's talk with Carmine after one quick break.
Humans. Their nature demands competition, the rising tide of aggression shaping the world around us. Natural fear and disgust can overcome the ability to reason. Coping skills are left wanting. Carmine Savastano, Human Time Bomb, The Violence Within Our Nature, poses significant questions and considers the evidence that violence shapes the past and present. Human Time Bomb, The Violence Within Our Nature. Order your digital and print copies now on Amazon.com. For more information, visit tpaak.com. Carmine Savastano, Human Time Bomb.
Hey, how you doing today, Carmine?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing, Mike?
Oh, good. Well, it's another week, another week of being locked down with the virus, but some people we know of have gotten themselves in a little bit of trouble. The FDA now is going after Alex Jones because he's pitching bogus remedies that don't work, that aren't real, and pitching it on his show, and now the FDA is going after him. He's claiming these can cure you from the coronavirus, and there's no reason to think that's real at all.
Yeah, no, it's akin to the stuff we talked about, I think it was last show, with Jim Baker coming out, you know, that preacher from the 80s that got busted for lying to everybody.
Well, what Jones apparently is saying is that he's got toothpaste, mouthwash, products like that can prevent getting the virus.
Well, the only way that could work is if you filled your entire mouth and all of your nasal cavities and your eyes with toothpaste. But then you'd probably choke to death, so it didn't really work.
You turned yourself into a toothpaste monster.
Exactly. That's the only way, by covering all entry points for the virus, that toothpaste is going to do anything. Brushing your teeth is not going to save you.
Well, this virus thing is, you know, myself and you, I think we're able to, I don't want to say the word is get used to the shutdown, but deal with it perhaps better than most people do, because we both are used to working out of our home. And I think a lot of people are getting real antsy, and it's easy, you know, to see a lot of people are spending more time online than they normally would too, which is that causes problems, which you touched on in your book, Human Time Bomb. But doing that, we're all being flooded by crazy stories and misinformation, even if you try to avoid it. I mean, I load up my Facebook usually about once or twice a day, and I'll see people sharing crazy stories. For example, the other week, someone had a video they were sharing and making it sound like they believed it, where this guy was saying that the virus wasn't real. He was claiming to be a CIA person too, which I didn't believe it. But anyway, he was saying that the virus wasn't real, but what was going to kill us was the vaccine that would be introduced to stop the virus. This would depopulate the planet. So, but that's a theme that's been on the Alex Jones show, like reducing the global population in some sort of plot. So maybe the people heard it from there. I don't know. I don't really, I only know Alex Jones is in trouble with the FDA because that's a news headline.
Yeah. Well, first I would say that if someone from the CIA is going to post disinformation, they're not going to say they're from the CIA. That's the first thing. If this person, and if they're from the CIA, they actually have to sign a secrecy agreement, so they're not going to tell you they're from the CIA because they could be sued or jailed, or there's a lot of things why, or a lot of reasons why someone from an agency is not going to identify themselves from being from an agency. So when someone does that, you might as well just toss aside whatever they say. If they say, I'm from the CIA, and don't even bother with the and, just toss it to the side. They're not from the CIA, or wherever they say they're coming from. And yeah, that brings us to, what we discussed somewhat earlier that is now expanded is basically disinformation. We're all being flooded with disinformation, unfortunately, from a lot of social media outlets.
Yeah, and you did an article the end of last month about that. I'm going to link to it. It's on your blog, tpoc.com, but the nations that cry disinformation. So, and I recommend people click and read it.
Yeah, and if you want to, I'll have to send you the link, but I actually did a show with Chuck Ocelli and Larry Hancock about foreign and domestic disinformation recently. Because, I mean, it is rampant now, and there's a lot of different agendas all going on, and the average person really doesn't have the time or has studied disinformation to an extent to where they're going to understand that that's what they're reading sometimes. Because if you look, like in the article, I talk about Russian and Chinese disinformation, that as soon as the world started to get angry about the origin point, the feasible origin point that everything points to, that all the evidence supports, being in Wuhan, China. So that is the feasible outbreak origin point. You can get into, and on that show that we'll throw in the references for a link, and I do get into a little bit of an argument with Chuck, and then we discuss it some more about where that, because definitively right now I think one of the things that's causing people a lot of anxiety and uncertainty is there are no definitive substantial massive facts that we can all grab onto to process this, and that unknown causes anxiety. That unknown variable, are we doing the right thing? What is the long-term damage of our actions going to be? Can everything ever get back to normal? How is this going to affect our lives personally? How is it going to affect our families, our friends? So there's a lot of unknowns, and that it's just going to cause, of itself is going to cause anxiety. So we need to understand that there are going to be some unknowns for a while. So we have to take the information that we do know and build ourselves a foundation of reality to operate from, of facts, of things that we can count on, that we do know. Even with, and I'll jump back to the disinformation, but sometimes it isn't disinformation, sometimes it's misinformation. They got it wrong. They were ignorant. They didn't know what they were talking about, or they were trying to do like with the WHO or the CDC, where we saw with the masks protocol, where for a time they said no one should wear masks, and now everyone should wear masks. Now, that wasn't because they were trying to disinform people. That wasn't because they were trying to be dishonest. But there were political leaders in those groups that didn't want to panic. So they didn't want to come right out at the beginning and say, everybody get masks now, everybody get into your houses, nobody, because that would have just triggered chaos. So they've had to revise their orders as they've understood more. And that's the thing. It's, everybody that's trying to say we should have known earlier, we can only operate with the facts that we have. We can't operate with the facts that we should have had. So that we have to be aware of all that. And that's where disinformation can be so destructive, is in now a time of raised anxiety and chaos in some parts of the world. There are people that will try to take advantage of that chaos, take advantage of the people dying and the grief that everybody's feeling to manipulate them.
Yeah. And, one thing I read was somewhere there's an interview with some lady like 100 years old or something. Mm-hmm. So, and she lived through the Depression and World War II and some other things. And she had advice about this situation and just said, well, these things happen and you go on. It's not going to go on forever.
Yeah.
And life, I'm not going to say it's going to be back the way it was, because things never go back exactly the way they were. I mean, we live in a different world now than we did 20 years ago. And I firmly believe that we're also beginning some time of economic change that's going to last for a year, 2 or 3, which in the future may be actually more important than the virus, when people look back on this time that we're living through. And I one time, I don't know if he's still alive, but I spoke with somebody he was German, born in Germany, and was in World War II as a child. And he, his whole country was destroyed, bombed out as a result of the war. And he said that in the last few months, they had no food. They were living in rubble and eating sawdust for bread. So, and how many countries around the world from time to time have had wars? I mean, look at Vietnam or Iraq, and so forth. And the people, it doesn't last forever, and they're able to live through it. So we can live through this for a couple months, I would say.
Well, yeah. Well, what I think this is this is a culture shock in a way too, is all happening amidst all of these other factors, because Americans are used to getting what they want when they want it. And that's not the way life works for most of the rest of the world. We've been under a delusion that things were always going to be great forever. And there was going to be no time and there was going to be no time that would ever come where we would have to use the old saying, pay the piper. Well, now we have to pay the piper because we didn't prepare properly for such an eventuality, even though we've had people back as far as the Clinton administration talking about this eventuality. So we don't have time for finger pointing right now. We need to be mobilizing. We need to be getting out there and trying to hold together the best and most important parts of our society, and then come together and try to mitigate the damage. Because all the finger pointing, as we go back into disinformation, that's what half of this finger pointing is. It's disinformation. It's people trying to frame the argument to support their agenda. And you're going to see that from both sides of the political spectrum. No one's immune. But that's the exact opposite of what should be going on right now. Instead of that, imagine for a moment if all the political, hype and scandal that is filling parts of the media were instead directed to mobilizing people to do something about this? What if all the people at home that were bored who had the skills could be making masks and making gowns and making hazmat suits and getting food cooperatives together so that nobody in their community goes hungry if there are any sorts of shortages, or getting old people any of the care that they need or dropping off groceries to them? Some people are doing that, but it hasn't caught on wide scale. There's a lot of things people could be doing to make things better. So instead of complaining, maybe help. Be part of the problem or part of the solution. And I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just say that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's, and I keep hearing these arguments about politics and just the whole clash of Democrats versus Republicans versus socialists versus communists versus the nationalists. None of that matters right now. None of it. None of the political ideology matters. Survival matters.
Well, one thing I wonder about this event is this going to make the culture war stuff irrelevant?
Well, I think it already
maybe
has.
even go away over time.
I hope. I don't know. I don't think it will, but I hope.
Well, I think it would. I think it could, because I really think we're going to have a tough time here, not just with the virus, but with the economy. And when people are worrying about work or losing their job and money, they may not have the time on their hands
for nonsense.
Or stuff that's been so popular with the Twitter warriors and people over the past couple of years.
Yeah. Well, it's now's the time to start refocusing. I think that the people who are going to do the best in what comes after the recovery is those who are using this opportunity now to try to make things better for themselves later. And I'm not talking about, the scumbags who are taking all the toilet paper. I don't mean make it better for yourself like that. I mean, just preparing for, the changes that are going to become necessary. Like, and this might seem like a small little thing, and it might gross out some people. And as you know, I'm one of those hand washing people. So even before this, I washed my hands a lot. But I've pretty much switched as much as possible from paper to cloth, because handkerchiefs make sure I don't burn through all what little paper can be had in the area. And that might become a concern for some people, especially people in rural areas where they're not going to have a lot of access. People who have children might want to start to consider switching from diapers to cloth, because eventually, if the paper products keep being shorted and, there's more and more disruption in all of the delivery systems, there's going to be a time where you're not going to be able to get everything that you need all the time. So there are things that used to exist in the past that we can fall back on, that existed before all these paper products were everywhere. I'm not saying, change everything, and I'm just trying to give, what I think are pragmatic, easy things you can do to cut down your consumption. And not only do you make it easier on yourself, where you don't have to rely on having so much paper and, becoming frantic if you can't get a hold of it, you also are putting less strain on the system. And I think we can do that with a number of things. There's a lot of ways. I bet you, like we talked about a couple shows, it was a couple shows back or last show, learn how to cook. Go on YouTube. And if you notice at the stores, people are starting to learn how to cook. You're noticing there's less spices sometimes and things like that. We can't be self-sufficient, all of us. We don't have to rely on things being handed to us. And those are going to be useful skills, I think, in the coming years.
Well, I've been cooking myself, and not going out and picking up food. Because
Which is a great idea. Yeah.
well, I like to go out to eat, but I realize I like to go out to eat with other people.
Yeah.
And if the choice is go to some store and grab food and bring it home, I just soon cook myself.
Well, and now I think that's a very good idea.
And then you realize it's a lot cheaper if you cook yourself, and it's usually better.
Yeah.
And then it's just not fun anymore to go buy food and go get it, and the person's scared. They're wearing a mask and they're scared. And so forth, and it's I don't see. I don't want to. It's not fun going and eating out, picking up this food. I mean, I know people still going. I don't know why they're going to McDonald's and these fast food places. It's not saving you money doing that, but they're not stopping their habits.
Well, exactly, and I think that we have to quickly adjust. This is something that needs to happen. And as far as like with the with the disinformation, it's just another adjustment we have to make. We have to filter out things that if it sounds like it's hyperbole, it probably is. If it sounds like it's not true, it probably isn't. Look into the facts of everything. Don't just assume and believe it. Because we should all be taking steps with disinformation and with, like you were saying, with changing our habits, because, and not to say that but I mean, what was it yesterday? I believe I think it was Smithfield, one of the biggest pork production factories in the country, had to shut down because 80 of their employees had coronavirus. So that's not going to be an isolated thing. Other places are going to shut down. You need to be able to cook. You need to be able to get some food for yourself from the store, or even, and I understand that there's farmers markets, there's farms, there's all sorts of local places in every state that so you can be secure, you can be sure that you have access to whatever you want to get, or you can stock up right now before anything. It's good just to have an extra stock anyway. I don't think you need to be a prepper. But it's not a bad idea to keep a few weeks of food around, perishable and non-perishable. But as you were saying, with the economic changes, I mean, there's going to be an economic, if you shut down, it's kind of like correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the economic expert, but I see this in a way as sort of like a running faucet. And we turned the tap down to where now it's just a drip of economic activity. And then eventually we're going to turn the tap back open so that it comes back out. But that entire time the tap is turned down almost all the way off, all that economic activity doesn't happen. So there's going to be a period when no water's coming out largely. And we're going to have to get through all of the adjustments and all the downsizing and all the companies that go under and all the companies that get purchased. And there's going to be, trials to deal with during that period.
Oh, for sure. And it's not going to be back booming for overnight,
Yeah, it's going to take just as much time, I would think, or more, to get back to where it was.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So we need to start preparing for that now. We don't need to be caught flat-footed again. The virus caught us flat-footed. And not just the United States, but every country in the world got caught flat-footed.
Well, how long do you think it'll be before these lockdowns in different parts of the country are actually lifted?
Well, I think you said, your state was doing June?
Yeah, June.
I don't know what the longest is. I've heard talk of even as far as July and August. I think they're going to have to do a partial lockdown. I was looking at some of the expert estimations, which is another thing we have to realize too, is right now, like we talked about earlier, it's the unknown that can cause anxiety, but there's a lot of scientific unknowns because science takes time. Anybody that tells you that they know everything about this virus is lying to you. Nobody knows everything about this virus. Novel is part of the name. They don't know. We're guessing. And based on the scientific guessing that I've seen, if we ever do a news show, we'll have to report honestly with words like that instead of calling it scientific analysis. The best scientific guessing. From the estimations I've seen, it basically said for it to totally go back to normal where nothing is locked down, they're talking maybe, what was it? I think it was 12 to 18 months.
Well, that's based on the estimate of a vaccine where that would make it, completely back to normal. But
Yeah.
it's
Well, and they have to have a successful vaccine.
right.
That isn't assured. Which is why I think they're doing the antivirals and why they're doing the treatments like with the hydroxychloroquine. Once again, I've seen the arguments about that too. It isn't proven either way. You know what I mean? It's anecdotal in some of it, and in some it didn't work. So we haven't had a big trial. We don't, we're working on the fly right now. So they're going to be trying to, I saw another one where they were trying a clot buster that seemed to work in one instance that they usually only use for strokes, that actually busted some of the clots in someone's lungs when their lungs were inflamed from the COVID, and it actually helped them get back to normal. But in another person, it killed them. So, this is desperate times call for desperate measures is basically what's going on.
Basically, you don't try to take it unless you're on the road to death already.
Yeah.
It's not a cure.
Easy
cure to play with.
No, none of it's exactly. None of it's a cure. It's doctors, but this is, and it sounds grim, and people are dying, but it's, if you have a choice of letting your patient die or try an unorthodox method to try to save them, you try to save them. This is how science, it's very messy and it's very brutal and it's very deadly for some people, but this is how science operates sometimes in a time of desperation. This is like we've talked about with 1918 or the Hong Kong flu. This has all happened before. It just never happened to any of us in this sort of a way. So it seems like all, like the woman that you talked about from 100 who lived to be 100, she's seen all of this multiple times.
A scary thing I see, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'll have to word it properly. 15 years ago, there's a company called Novavax. And they trade on the stock market. The symbol is NVAX. And they put out press releases saying that they were working on a vaccine for AIDS. And the stock went up on this. However, they weren't doing the trials inside the United States because they couldn't get the approval. So they were doing it somewhere in Asia and using this news to get people excited about the stock. Problem is, you can't make a vaccine for AIDS, and it's very, very shady to be doing trials like that the way they were. Eventually the stock crashed. They weren't able to create their wonder drug. And then a few years later, they said they were creating some sort of cure for Alzheimer's disease. And then 6 days ago, they put out a press release identifying coronavirus vaccine candidate. So there's drug companies out there that periodically try to develop miracle cures, never come up with success, but it happens over and over again. And this is just one instance of, stuff happening. The stock was $4 in January, and now it's under 18. I'm not shorting it, but maybe I should be at some point. but this is the kind of stuff. Maybe maybe they have a few things that are good, but there's many companies. Let me put it to you this way. A lot of people want to try to make money investing in stocks that are going to develop the cure. And I just think that's like throwing darts in the dark, because no one knows which company is going to come up with it first,
and only one will.
And only exactly, only one will. So it's just a stupid thing to be betting on or trying to make money off of, betting on these type of stocks that are working on these things. I mean, so let's just assume that this Novavax, this time they got something that has a better chance of working. Well, there's probably other companies that had the same chance. So
who are probably licensed in the United States.
Well, they might be. That one drug, it was that AIDS vaccine they weren't able to do the testing here. But
or testing, I should say, not them. They're apparently licensed because they're allowing them to operate. But
yeah, I don't know all the details about this. I'm just reading the story as we're speaking, and the name of it came in my mind, the company. I was like, I wonder if they're doing a coronavirus thing, and I typed it in. Yeah, they are. So as we're speaking,
well, yeah, and it goes to show you, as far as of course they are. Disinformation knows no bounds. Shame knows no. These people have never heard of the word shame. And that you checked, and predictably they are doing it, and we're seeing it from all sides right now. We've got companies trying to make money, we've got hucksters like Jim Baker and Alex Jones trying to make money, and of course one of our other least favorite hucksters, Judith Baker. For those familiar with JFK myths and some of the shows we've done on that, she too, of course, is now using this to try to get some attention.
What is she doing?
Well, she's telling people that, the best foods to eat, that apparently, kind of like, I guess she's, trying to, apparently she's going to make diet tips and, all this other nonsense that apparently is going to help, her followers. And then, never to be satisfied with just putting a toe in the pool. Judy likes to throw herself head first into the pool. And now she's inadvertently, it's hard to tell with her sometimes, and her or whoever's posting for her on Facebook under her account. But it's hard to tell whether this is misinformation, as in, she heard something and now is going to run with it, or if this is disinformation, whether she actively understands what she's repeating and pushing it forward because it serves her purposes. Could be either or. But I'm leaning towards disinformation because it's only someone who pays attention to nothing in world events would not understand that what this is disinformation. So we had already gone through, I believe, prior some of the Chinese and Russian disinformation that was circulating, trying to blame the United States and trying to blame Europe for the coronavirus, saying it was created in a lab. And what eventually got my attention was when I started to hear talk of Fort Detrick again. And Fort Detrick, from my and Mike's background, having studied intelligence in the military, was a site in the 60s, 70s, and I think part of the 80s where there were chemicals and viruses and poisons that the military had stored, that they had studied and the CIA had studied and used in different occasions. But they were, created in the 60s. So they couldn't have had the virility or the power of AIDS. But when AIDS came out, was discovered largely starting to affect areas in the 80s, Russia put out this thing called Operation Infection that was designed to blame it on the United States. And they tried to say that it was targeting gay people and black people to try to stir up some more, minority discontentment within the country. So this is the same thing we see again happening, or that has already happened recently, with Russia and China trying to blame Europe and the United States. And then in China's narrative, which was actually put out by one of the lower ranking state officials, they said that it was from Fort Detrick. And in Russia's narrative for infection, they said that AIDS came from Fort Detrick. And now Judith Baker is repeating that the Chinese propaganda and saying Fort Detrick is the origin of the virus in the United States. So she's blaming the U.S. government and saying that it was from Fort Detrick.
So she's just following what they're saying.
Yeah. Now, why she's doing that is anybody's guess, but she's doing it. So, and this just goes to show you all of her background that she claims to have. None of the training, of course. She has no actual scientific training beyond high school. But all of her supposed background in understanding viruses is nonsense. She's actively engaging, unknowingly or knowingly, as a dupe of Chinese propaganda against the United States because she wants attention, I guess. I don't know. Because she can't find time to read a book or do some research. So instead,
I mean, this is what's in the news, the coronavirus, and so
she wants to be relevant.
She wants to, and to have something to tell people that are in her group. Basically, that's what she has, a group of followers.
Her mini Lyndon LaRouche cult.
Well, it's funny. The LaRouche people, the story about the you wrote about it. I didn't know the name of it till you told me. The Operation Infection that the KGB did, linking AIDS to Fort Detrick. The LaRouche people in the 80s are the ones that really spread that inside the United States, that idea. So I guess they probably got it from the KGB people, or read it from them first. But they're the ones, as far as I know, that really were the real purveyors of that theory inside the United States, at least that were Americans.
Well, and it wouldn't surprise me if the KGB or, even a person that they associated with, it could even be a press person who unknowingly was slipped the information. Because that's the best way I've seen in some instances is you just slip it to your enemies and you let them disseminate it. You don't have to actually do anything yourself if you can get them to do it for you. So, and even better if it's a topic of controversy. Because right now, what Chinese intelligence, Russian intelligence, and hopefully our intelligence and European intelligence understand is that this is the best moment. Because there's so much unknown, because there's so much uncertainty about everything, people are more susceptible to ideas they'd never consider under normal circumstances when they weren't afraid.
Oh yeah, sure. And we live in a tough time where, people are told everything is fake. All the news is fake, and then and then they're told everything the president says isn't true. So what are they to believe?
Yeah, which isn't. I think we should establish that too. That people need to understand. It's not that it's all fake. It's that for the large part, I'd say 98% is heavily biased. There is some truth to be had. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any one source that has it all, and there isn't any one group, whether it's societal or political, that has it all. There's a little bit of truth, I think, to be had from a lot of different sources, and then you can take that truth and put it together and then form a better picture. But I wouldn't trust any single source to give me the answers on a majority of topics. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, we're faced with, going back to the topic, of disinformation, that whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, a lot of news sources, both in the alternative media, in the mainstream media, and being offered by official sources, it has their bent, of course, in all of it, no matter what. There's going to be their political and their ideological bent in all of it. But they're all largely repeating what other people are saying. There is very little actual on-the-ground reporting going on. There's, I think, AP, Reuters, and there might be a couple others. There is some on-the-ground reporting, but if you look at a lot of the bylines of these stories, it's just them repeating, and it's provided by such and such. It's not them actually going out and finding out the facts themselves. They're just repeating what somebody told them.
Well, I mean, I was looking at today, our local newspaper where I live, and it's all national news stories are getting somewhere else. 90% of it.
Yeah, it's all just basically aggregate news.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that explains some of the reason why when people see, I don't know, I can't remember, but there's a couple videos I'm sure on YouTube where it's, no matter what talking point it is and wherever it emerges from, sometimes you'll see on the news where they'll take the nightly news from a bunch of different places across the country and line it up, and it's all basically the exact same words of some reports. Like there's a clearinghouse of stories that everybody just gets sent every day. And they don't even bother to change the words. They just repeat it verbatim. I think that might be one of the big problems. Because I'm only 42. I don't feel that old, but I do remember when there was a big difference in reporting from channel to channel. It wasn't all the same style. It wasn't all the same content. There were big stories that pretty much everybody covered, but they usually didn't cover them exactly the same. So I think that also is part of the problem. I think that, there's no individuality in reporting. There's no actual on-the-ground fact gathering. And that's going to lead to more disinformation, because they are more want to then just by nature trust whoever their chosen sources are. They're just going to report it. And that's why you see, and another thing is there's no retractions, like real retractions. We need to see those more in the media. They need to admit mistakes when they make them, and then you'll trust them. Because if you can be honest enough to admit you made a mistake and then say you're sorry, and not try to hide it or reframe it or delete the post and then put out a new headline and act like nothing ever happened, that damages the credibility of the media. And it's not just the media. Officials do that too, where they'll try to remove tweets and act like they never said things. Either don't say it or do and deal with the consequences. But this whole, I'm going to say it and then I'm going to try to information hole it doesn't work. There's too many people out there that are screenshotting everything politicians and media people say.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a question of the reason why I think there's so much doubt about the integrity and about the reasonableness of so many different officials, from the president all the way down to the speaker to everybody and throughout the media, is because there are real reasons to doubt them, because they do not act with integrity a lot. So the average person, that feeling they have, that suspicion, is genuine, and it's rightful in some ways. It's just we can't let that feeling overtake us. We can't think that they're all like that, because they're not. There's a lot of good people that I know personally, that are working at the lower levels of different institutions, trying to make them better, trying to get people the truth. But unfortunately, there's a system that's been put in that is largely corporate run, that has overtaken the news since roughly the 70s, the 80s, that has now basically rendered the news not just less relevant, but less honest, because it's serving a bottom line rather than just reporting. Because the money and the clicks matter rather than the truth. And if you make a system like that, what do you expect is eventually going to happen? But what is happening right now?
Well, what's the answer to it all?
Honestly, I think the answer is that press and news divisions need to make nothing. They need to go back to zero. They need to be able to accept a loss on the news if they want to be credible. I'm not saying they have to, and they probably won't. But if we want a credible news source, it needs to not be money driven. Because as soon as it becomes money driven, you become beholden to the people giving you the money. Like it's not a surprise that if you look at all these coronavirus reports, CNN, Fox, all of them, you're getting hit with commercials for drugs in between. All the companies that are now making huge windfalls from the CARES Act are still trying to sell you their overpriced drugs, while you're desperate. And then we've got officials that are talking about, we'll try to get more loans out to people and more, we've gone into some of this already, but I still don't think it's sank in, or they're just denying it for some officials. They don't understand the depth of what this is and what the costs are going to be afterwards. And that's why, like we mentioned earlier, that's why they need to do something. They need, whatever they think. And I understand they're under a lot of pressure too. No one was prepared for any of this. So I'm not going to say that, it's just because they're not serious individuals and they're not paying enough attention. They're all under, probably a lot more stress than some of us, some of them. The ones who actually care, I mean. Unfortunately, there's a large chunk of them that don't. And, another thing I think is happening too, which is causing more confusion, is in some corners, I think we're seeing a political realignment. Like you said, is where some things are becoming more meaningless, like some of these foolish divisions that we've had for the last, they've been for decades, but they've gotten really out of hand the last four to, I'd say, 8 years.
Right.
Second term of Obama was when things really started to get bad as far as just unnecessary divisions. And now, people wonder why. It's like, all that time when everybody was gleefully insulting each other and, saying that, they were deplorable or they were communists is all wasted. Not only is it all wasted time, but it was time we spent in the United States as a country hating each other for no real reason, for people we're never going to meet, for people who don't care about us now. And we can't get that time back. So it's time to adjust. It's time to move forward. It's time to stop hating people and attacking people for nonsense, for political ideology that ultimately, at the end of the day, politics doesn't matter to our safety, to our survival. It doesn't matter to our families. It doesn't matter it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. And I think that needs to be an assessment that everyone needs to make for themselves. But this tribal need to play political dodgeball needs to go away for a while. We don't have time for it. It's a luxury. And that's another thing I think that we're all in. What is going on in our country right now goes on in third world countries all the time. Everybody who doesn't know what it's like to live in a third world country, guess what? We're getting a taste. Because in dictatorships, in places like China, they can just do this whenever they want, all the time. So this is why we need, and I've had arguments with people too, because some have called me a classic liberal, some have called me a very, a capitalist libertarian, but regulatory, of course. I don't believe in free capital. I don't believe in any free, where it's just totally, you let, the dictation of people's greed determine anything. I think there has to be laws. But, what we're seeing right now is corporatism. It's not capitalism, because in a free market, all these luxury companies go down. We shouldn't be saving them. We shouldn't be saving anything we don't need right now. That's a free market. In a free market, the merit keeps the companies that are necessary above everyone else. And that goes back to essential workers as well, too. We look right now, who is necessary to keep everything functioning? It isn't a bunch of high-paid people who sit in boardrooms, I'll tell you that. It's people who are out there doing the jobs that we need done. Plumbers and, people who are doing structural repair, structural changes to hospitals so they can accommodate all the new rooms and the new beds that they have. The people who are creating all, of the food that we need. Farmers. All these people who nobody ever pays attention to or derides in normal times are actually the people that keep our society functioning. Politicians, we certainly don't need as many as we have. I mean, what is it doing? What solution is being rendered other than a wealth extraction from us by politicians?
No, it's an interesting time, but see where things go.
Hopefully, I wasn't. I wasn't.
But I'm just
too much
thinking you're
down.
saying all these things, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if Sheldon Adelson would agree with you.
Oh, and I'm sure he wouldn't. But of course, Sheldon, like everybody else, is hiding in his house right now. Now, isn't he?
Or his suite.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It doesn't. Just like
Or his marina. Or he's in Macau. Or he's in
Yeah.
one of 20 other places he might have,
Yeah. Wherever he's huddling, I hope he brought a bunch of money because you're going to run out of toilet paper and need something to wipe with. Because ultimately now, we're seeing that all that money and all those riches and all those resources, and even with the wealth extraction, take as much, and we should fight them on every step of the way. But no matter how much they take, it won't save them. Nobody seems to have gotten that yet. All these rich people don't seem to understand. You need all of these other people to buy your products. You need other people to work your businesses. You can't do this alone. So you might as well get it through your head that you're going to have to evolve and you're going to have to be more productive as far as helping the society. Because the society ultimately doesn't need you. The society will be fine. It will go on. So I just think, we need to take a hard look at our society, and some structural changes need to happen. And as you know, like I said, I believe in strongly regulated capitalism, but being a capitalist, I also believe in free markets. And in free markets, those who are no longer useful to the society go down. They go out of business. That's it. You don't prop them up. You don't save them. We shouldn't be bailing out anybody that isn't going to be of use to our society. And if you've got a lot of money, save yourselves. Otherwise, why do you have all that money?
Well, I wish they wouldn't bail these people out, but I'm afraid
they will.
they're going to.
Yeah, but we all just
ways it's hard to even imagine. But
we just need to remember this, because when the time comes, we and not just because I would go call your congressman. Yeah, that's great. Do that if you want to, and vote if you want to. Because right now I really don't see much of a difference between the two major candidates.
All right. Well, with that said, I'll leave everyone with that thought, and we'll catch up again in a week or two.
Okay, I'll try to be more sunshine next time, I promise.
No, hey, this is the time we live in,
I know.
It is.
Hey, I was a cynic beforehand. This hasn't helped.
But everyone needs to get your book, though, Human Time Bomb, and check out the article on disinformation. They'll get a lot out of the book once they read it. But thanks for taking the time to talk to me and everyone else.
I'm happy to do it, Mike, and I hope you and everybody out there stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.